There is a question I have been sitting with for 74 years. Not consciously, not every day, not with deliberate attention, but underneath everything, running quietly, the way certain questions do when they are important enough to stay, but uncomfortable enough that you keep finding reasons not to look at them directly. Does the past matter? Not philosophically, not as an intellectual exercise. In the real, felt, daily sense, in the sense that affects how you wake up in the morning, how you treat the people around you, how you carry yourself through ordinary days, and what you do with the weight of everything that came before this moment. Does it matter? Should you carry it? Should you put it down? Can you put it down? And if you do put it down, if you find a way to stop dragging 40 or 50 or 60 years of accumulated history into every room you enter, does something important get lost in the setting down? Or does something important finally get found? I am 74 years old, and I want to tell you what I have learned about this question. Not the comfortable version, not the version that ties everything neatly together and leaves you feeling resolved. The honest version, the one that took me most of my life to arrive at, and that I am still arriving at, more deeply, every year. Before I go further, if anything I say today lands somewhere true, please like this video. Share it with someone who is still carrying something from their past that is costing them more than they know. And subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. These conversations cost something to have, honestly. Knowing they reach someone who needs them makes every word worth saying. Now, let me tell you where I was before I understood any of this. I was a man haunted by two things simultaneously. And the strange, uncomfortable thing, the thing that took me decades to see clearly, is that those two things pulled in exactly opposite directions. The first thing was regret. The past as a collection of mistakes, decisions I had made badly, moments I had handled wrongly, relationships I had damaged or ended, or failed to build properly, opportunities I had walked past without recognizing them. The version of myself that had done those things, younger, less wise, sometimes frightened, sometimes careless, sometimes simply wrong, followed me into every new chapter, into every new relationship, into every room I entered, where I was trying to be someone different from who I had been. The second thing was identity, the past as the source of everything that made me who I was. My values, shaped by what I had survived. My understanding of the world built from what it had done to me and what I had done within it. My sense of what mattered, forged in the specific fires of the specific experiences that had been mine and nobody else's. Strip away the past, and you do not have a freer version of me. You have a version of me with no foundation. Both of these things were true simultaneously. The past was weight, the past was foundation, and most of the time I did not know which one it was being at any given moment, and neither, I suspect, do you. Does that sound like the relationship you have with your own history? The moment this question became urgent, rather than theoretical, arrived when I was 61. My younger brother, a man I had been in a complicated relationship with for most of my adult life, shaped by things that had happened between us decades earlier, became seriously ill, and I drove to the hospital with every intention of finally saying the things that needed to be said, finally crossing the distance that had been between us, finally putting down the history and being simply present with the person. I sat beside his bed for 3 hours, and I said almost none of it. Not because I didn't want to, not because the moment wasn't there, but because the past was so thoroughly present in that room. Every unresolved conversation, every old wound, every version of us that had accumulated over 40 years, that I could not find my way through it to the thing I had come to say. He recovered. We had more time. Some of it we used better than the hospital visit. But the experience sat with me as a question, as an accusation almost, for the years that followed. Why had the past been more present in that room than the present was? And as I sat with that question, really sat with it, without the usual deflections, I began to understand something that reorganized the way I thought about all of it. I had been treating the past as something that happened to me, as a set of fixed events with fixed meanings that I carried whether I chose to or not. I had not understood, had not allowed myself to understand, that the meaning of the past is not fixed, that the story I was telling about what had happened was not the only story available, that the interpretation I had assigned to old events, the version that made me the recipient of certain things, the perpetrator of others, the person shaped in particular ways by particular experiences, was not an objective truth, but a choice I had been making and remaking, unconsciously, every day for decades. The past had not been happening to me. I had been happening to the past, giving it the meanings that served me, or that I thought served me, without realizing that some of those meanings were costing me more than the original events had. I had been carrying a story about my brother that was decades old, and that story had been more real to me in that hospital room than the man lying in the bed. That understanding was not comfortable. It is not comfortable now, recounting it, but it was the beginning of something, because if the meaning of the past is not fixed, if it is something I am actively constructing rather than passively receiving, then I have more agency in relation to it than I had ever allowed myself to believe. Not to change what happened, nothing changes what happened, but to change what I am doing with it, what I am letting it do to me, what I am allowing it to determine about who I am today and who I am capable of being tomorrow. What story are you telling about your own past right now? And is that story serving you? Or have you been so inside it for so long that you have stopped being able to see it as a story at all, and started experiencing it simply as the truth? Let me tell you what carrying the past the wrong way actually cost me. Not in theory, in the specific named reality of a life examined honestly from the inside at 74. It cost me presence. Every room I entered carrying the full unexamined weight of my history was a room I was only partly in. Part of me was always somewhere else, in the old argument, in the old wound, in the replay of something that had happened 15 years ago, and that I had never fully processed because processing it would have required a level of honesty with myself that I consistently found ways to avoid. The people in those rooms, the people trying to reach the version of me that was actually there, were getting the remainder, the portion left after the past had taken its share. It cost me relationships, specifically the ones that were innocent of what I was bringing to them. There were people in my life who received the full weight of histories they had played no part in creating, who encountered my defensiveness, or my distance, or my particular way of protecting myself. All of it developed in response to things that had happened long before they arrived, without understanding what they were encountering. And some of those people, patient as they were, eventually found the weight too heavy to carry on behalf of experiences that weren't theirs. It cost me the ability to change. The past held the wrong way, carried as a fixed identity rather than as the raw material of an evolving one, has a gravity that works against growth. If I am the person that those things made me, then I am also permanently the person that those things made me. The limitation is built into the story, and I believed the limitation for decades longer than it was true, because the story had become so familiar that questioning it felt like questioning myself. But here is what the past gave me. And I want to be precise about this, because this is as true as everything I have just said. It gave me everything I am. Not some of it, all of it. Every capacity I have for compassion was built in places where I needed compassion and did not always find it. Every understanding I have of what other people carry was built by carrying things myself. Every piece of wisdom, whatever wisdom I have, was purchased at the full price of the experience that produced it. Nothing came free, nothing came without cost. And nothing, when I am honest, would I want to have come without the cost, because the cost was what made it real. The question is never whether the past matters. It does. It always does. The question is how. Does it matter as a prison or as a foundation? Does it matter as an identity you are trapped inside, or as the material from which you are still building? Does it matter as the definitive story of who you are, closed, complete, unchangeable, or as the ongoing story of a person who is still in the middle of becoming something? Those are not the same question. And the answer you are living right now, the one in your body rather than your mind, determines more about the quality of your daily life than almost anything else I can think of. Now speak directly to yourself, not to me. What are you still carrying from your past that you are treating as permanent when it might actually be portable? What old story are you living inside that might have served you once and is no longer serving you now? What would change specifically, practically, in the life you are actually living if you decided that the past had given you everything it has to give and that what it gave you was enough to build something new from? Here is what I know now. At 74, after the hospital visit, and the brother, and the decades of sitting with this question more and more honestly each year, the past matters enormously, and the past does not define you. Both of those things are completely true, and holding both of them simultaneously, without collapsing into either the version that dismisses the past as irrelevant or the version that is permanently imprisoned by it, is one of the hardest and most important things a human being can learn to do. The dismissal is easy to understand. Let it go. Move on. Don't let the past hold you back. These are phrases that sound like freedom and frequently function as avoidance. The past that is not examined does not disappear. It goes underground. It continues operating in the patterns you repeat without understanding why, in the defenses you carry without knowing you are carrying them, in the limitations you accept as permanent that are actually historical. Telling someone to simply let go of something they haven't yet understood is not liberation. It is postponement. But the imprisonment is equally costly. The person who is so thoroughly inside their history that every present moment is filtered through the lens of what has already happened, who cannot meet a new person without the shadow of old people falling across them, who cannot make a new choice without the weight of old choices pulling at them. That person is not living in the present. They are living in a museum, and museums are important, valuable, even, but you cannot build a life in one. The work, the actual, ongoing, never fully finished work is the third thing. The integration, the honest examination of what happened and what it meant and what you have been doing with it, and whether the story you have been telling is the most truthful and most useful story available, not to rewrite history, not to pretend the painful things were not painful, but to understand them deeply enough that they become part of you rather than a weight outside you, to digest them rather than just carry them, to let them inform your choices rather than determine them. I did not do this work well for most of my life. I did it partially, in fits and starts, when the pressure of something forced me toward it. The hospital visit was one of those moments. There were others. Each one moved me further along a path that I wish I had started walking much earlier. Here is the warning, specific and direct. The past will do one of two things. It will be examined, honestly, with the courage required to look at both what was done to you and what you did, at both the legitimate wounds and the stories you have built around them, and in being examined, it will begin to serve you as foundation, as source, as the raw material of a person who has lived and learned and is still building. Or it will remain unexamined. And in remaining unexamined, it will continue to operate anyway, in the background, underground, with the influence of something that has never been brought into the light and questioned. And that underground operation will cost you things you will not always be able to see being taken. The examination is not comfortable. I will not pretend it is. Looking honestly at your own history, at your regrets and your wounds, and the ways you have contributed to both, requires a kind of courage that the comfortable life does not develop. It is easier, always, to carry the past unexamined, to call it your identity and leave it at that. But you are not your past. You are what you have done and are doing with it. And what you do with it, how you hold it, how you examine it, how much of yourself you allow it to determine, is a choice that is available to you right now. Not unlimited time, I can tell you that from 74. But enough to begin, enough to have the conversations you have been postponing, enough to look at the stories you have been living inside and ask whether they are still serving the person you are today, rather than the person you were when they were written. Does the past matter? Yes, entirely. And the most important thing it matters for, the highest use it can be put to, is not as an explanation for who you are. It is as the material from which you are still, right now, actively choosing who to become. You still have time to choose. Please start choosing. If this reached something in you, share it. With someone carrying a past that is heavier than it needs to be. With someone who needs to hear that the story is not finished. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't. And leave a comment. Tell me about the part of your past you are still figuring out how to carry. I read every single one. Every one. There is more to say. There is always more. And at 74, every day, I get to say it is the right use of whatever time remains.